onto the territories that are pro-Kabul, really, because that's what it really comes down to, and try to prevent the insurgents from moving into the northern areas, while trying to seek a political settlement with the Pushtun elements that will talk to the Americans and will talk to Kabul. Now Karzai just in his inauguration speech, of course, said he would talk to Mullah Omar, and Mullah Omar said he wasn't going to speak back. But that's the Taliban. The problem is to argue that roughly, estimates are some 70% of the Taliban aren't hardcore. They're not linked to Al-Qaeda. And they could possibly make a deal with them if you found the right combination of assistance, bribery, what have you. But this film, I thought, was a dramatic thing. This is a war of attrition. The Taliban just have to sit there, and they send one sniper out that holds a whole company down for a bit, and then a helicopter comes in. Now, luckily, they don't have Stinger missiles the way we had provided the forces against the Soviet Union during that war. So but the cost, they are doing this in a way to make the cost as expensive as possible. Of course, they're more willing to sacrifice life than we are. They're obviously willing to put their children in front in order to prevent, the Western forces from hitting. We're obviously concerned with civilian killing or so-called collateral damage. So it just makes me even more pessimistic about the possibilities. On the other hand, I don't think the situation is as bad as the Taliban's ready to take over. I think there's significant resistance against the Taliban. I think there's real splits within the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. I think there's a number of factors. If we play this game a little more politically, we might be able to, as I said, split this Taliban somewhere between 70 and 30%, and begin to isolate the most militant faction. But again, that's going to take some time, and I'm not sure how many troops it's going to need. That's the other problem. This can't go on forever because of the expense. We're talking $1 million per soldier on the ground. We had 40,000 more, 30,000 more as is expected to be announced. We're talking quite a lot of money. And I don't think it's going to hold up. And I can say a lot of other things.
Look, I'm sure. Obviously, there are so many issues to be explored here. Let's bring in Pierre now. Clearly we saw in the film, Pierre, the determination of the Taliban to create a situation which is incredibly difficult for the soldiers on the ground there. In terms of the French involvement in Afghanistan, do you feel that the French troops should be there?
Well, it depends. Do you ask the question to a French citizen? Do you ask the question to a former civil servant? Do you ask the question to independent experts? Just a remark about what you were, the question you were asking just before. It's not Vietnam, it's Afghanistan, unfortunately. Because you remember that in Vietnam, the problem mainly was it was a nationalist fight. Afghanistan, one of the warlords used to say, in Afghanistan, no one can buy a warlord, but you can rent it. Right. That's very interesting sentence, because that's exactly the main result of the war, which means that you can win in a region, and 15 days after the guy has changed his mind, and because of lollipop culture, because of money, because of different reasons, it becomes an enemy. And we are the third power of the third alliance trying to fight in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, the former one was the British. It was at the end of the 19th century. And then the Russian, the Soviets, which was presented at that time, as the efficient army in the world, remember. And now the NATO forces. As a French citizen, what is the most shocking for me is that one can't imagine that we can win a war with, on the one hand, trying to get hearts and minds, as I was explaining the French officer, and on the other hand, you have a US force bombing the north of Pakistan. I don't think that the 5 kilos bomb is a good weapon to fight against terrorists and to fight against Taliban. The same week in which, 11 French military men were killed. A bombing in the north of Afghanistan killed 90 persons, which means that you can't win by this means. And on this report, it was very interesting to notice that no Afghan was filmed, which means that the enemy is quite invisible, even for the reporter.
Indeed, indeed. So in terms of the idea of winning hearts and minds, or as the
I prefer the French expression,
win
actually.
trust and respect.
But still.
Doesn't that ring, in a sense, like a kind of almost brainwashed rhetoric?
Well, I've talked to some on the American side, and it is possible to begin to get their trust and respect, but the question is, they don't know how long we're really going to provide those things. So yes, they did provide shots, they did provide food, they did provide lollipops, as you said. But how long? They've gone through this before historically. In their culture, they're used to one invasion after another. You go back centuries. You don't have to go back. You can go back farther than the Brits. Go back to Alexander the Great.